Let's take you back to one of our leading stories for today, the shooting attack in Jerusalem, and also the Israeli Defense Force calling for the evacuation of residents in Gaza City. Well, let's bring in security analyst Saul Sadka to discuss this further. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Hello, Saul. Thank you for your time on the program.
Pleasure to be with you today.
Well, let me begin by asking your thoughts on this latest attack in Jerusalem, the recent Hamas attack. How do you think this is going to affect, the ongoing conflict?
The attack yesterday was absolutely tragic, and it's of a piece with what's been happening in this region for 80 years, and a relic back to the Intifada of the early 2000s, when I remember I lived in Jerusalem at the time. I recall on a regular basis, you had bombs going off and shooting attacks. And yesterday was a hearkening back to that time. But what we saw today, the reaction as it is presented by the government here, is a sign of a shift in tone, a shift in the way that Israel will deal with its enemies.
And what does this mean, for the broader security situation? I imagine this attack has, heightened concern and anxiety.
It has, but of course, there is always anxiety in the Middle East on all sides. People are always worried. There is always the threat of violence in the background. But the main thing that Israel has told the enemies that it has in the Middle East is that this will not be allowed to continue. And that if you think that Jewish blood is still cheap, you will pay the price. And as we saw today in Qatar, it might take years for people to pay the price, but Israel will make them pay the price.
Well, let's talk about, the call now for Gaza City residents to evacuate. This is yet another, evacuation order. And how can this, be implemented without really posing significant challenges? And most importantly, balancing the security objectives. How is Israel doing that with the need to minimize civilian suffering?
The suffering of the civilians in Gaza is at the forefront of the Israeli army's activities there since the beginning of this war. There's no question that they are suffering tremendously. Most of them, at this point, I believe, are homeless. The reason they are homeless, and the reason they are suffering, and the reason that hundreds of thousands of Hamas, of Gaza City residents are being forced out is because of Hamas. Hamas has 20 hostages that it's still holding, as well as 28 bodies, and refuses to give them up, even though they are essentially defeated and are merely a rabble at this point. Their leaders mostly died today in Qatar. Even still, they refuse to hand over the bodies and the hostages. And as a result, the war has to continue. Israel has to go house to house in Gaza City to find them. Israel would much rather that Hamas surrenders, hands over its weapons, returns the hostages, returns the bodies, and allows the Middle East to get back to working towards peace, as it was doing 2 years ago before Sinwar set this chaos in motion. The people of Gaza City are certainly suffering, but the IDF are doing everything in their capabilities to ensure that they suffer as little as possible, and that they are provided with food and shelter, and they are being evacuated to a humanitarian zone for that reason, so they can get out of the line of fire, out of the war zone.
All right then, security analyst Saul Sadka, thank you so much for speaking to us.
My pleasure. Have a good day.